Really interesting fight. In our main event of the evening, we have the Black Beast Derrick Lewis taking on the Boa Constrictor, Aleksei Oleinik, and this is a classic clash of styles, man. And we got a fighter looking for their elusive 60th professional win in Aleksei Oleinik, coming in here at 59-13-1, taking on the Black Beast, 23-7 with 1-0 contest peppered in there. Matt, for both of these guys, I mean, if you look at their last five, it's identical. You got to win, 2 losses, and then they're on 2-fight win streaks. And for Derrick Lewis, we're talking that loss back there. That was Daniel Cormier for the belt. And yeah, it was one of those ones where Cormier wanted to add to his legacy, and Derrick Lewis is on a nice win streak. So, hey, here's an opportunity. Definitely didn't go his way. Then he lost to Junior Dos Santos, picks up a win over Blagoy Ivanov by split decision, and beats Ilir Latifi in a fight where Latifi had too much success for Ilir Latifi at 265 pounds at this stage. But I digress. We look at Aleksei Oleinik, a guy that's main evented for the UFC in the past. He submits Mark Hunt. He loses to Overeem by knockout. He loses to Walt Harris by knockout. Submits Maurice Green, which was kind of a weird fight. And then beats Fabrizio Verdum in a split decision where Verdum had a lot of time off due to the USADA suspension, came in, looked like a bag of milk. And then he goes out and beats Gustafsson and looks like the former champ. But that was the last fight on an expiring contract, and you just get to pad your pocketbook in that fight. Now, we look at Olienik. We know the submission abilities are there. The Ezekiel chokes are insane. We know Derrick Lewis is a huge power puncher, but we always talk about this X factor with Derrick Lewis, where he's got this gas tank that can be kind of sketchy. If he's not injured, he typically has lots of success, and he's not a terrible wrestler. Like, he can get out of some bad spots. He can get a takedown often if he needs to. And one of the things that's weird is if he's on his back, he can pop up fairly easily. None of those things bode well against a guy like Aleksei Oleinik, and that, to me, makes this fight so interesting. It's more than just the power puncher versus a submission artist. What do you make of this fight? And listen, I want to say this. If this fight's out of 5 stars, how many stars are you going to give it?
Like 3. Because you got to think, like, some of the main events that we get UFC-wise, and again, I'm going back to just the ones that really stand in my mind. Like
Jessica I, Cynthia Calvillo.
Okay, now that might be the greatest fight I've ever seen, but other than that one, when you really think about it, like Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier was the last main event to be in the Apex, and like if you're a real MMA fan, that's as good of an MMA fight as you could pretty much get that doesn't have a title on the line. Just for entertainment wise, this is going to be one of those fights where it's either going to be really one-sided for one guy or the other. I don't see this being a close competitive fight throughout 4 rounds, and then Derrick Lewis lands something big in the 5th. It's probably going to be either Oleinik gets him to the ground and chokes him unconscious fairly easily. Because Derrick Lewis, he's got that ability to just stand up because he's so big and explosive. And like you had mentioned, he's a fairly underrated grappler. I know he can get taken down quite a bit. And that seems to be a lot of his opponent's game plans. They're so aware of the big power that he can bring into the cage that, oh, I'm just going to shoot for takedowns, shoot for takedowns, shoot for takedowns. And if Oleinik does that, he's going to gas himself out. Because out of these two, Derrick Lewis easily is the better gas tank over Aleksei Oleinik. Because Oleinik, who fought for Doom, he did really well for the first 2 rounds. Now, the only weird thing about that fight, though, and I think it's something that was really important, was when the fight hit the mat, Verdum was way better than Oleinik. It was just Oleinik had that wonky, like, and not even punching, like, he just clubs people. He doesn't throw a punch, he just, like, hits them over the head. And now it seems to work. He's very unorthodox in that approach, but it's been very successful.
Throwback to the Travis Brown fight.
That's what I was just about to mention. It was a really important fight because Brown, hurt Oleinik early on in that fight, was able to drop him. But Oleinik was just like rushing forward with those big looping shots, ends up clipping Brown, taking his back and choking him out. Now, I don't know if he has the power to drop Derrick Lewis because Derrick Lewis, for the most part, had a pretty good chin. I know JDS is able to TKO him, but he tore his, I believe, ACL and MCL before that fight and still fought on basically one knee. So I don't really think he can take a lot from that performance. Especially going into this. Junior Santos also has absurdly crisp boxing, and Oleinik again, very, those Deontay Wilder wide looping shots. If the fight goes to the mat, that's where it gets really interesting. Because if Oleinik's on top for any period of time, Derrick Lewis is probably screwed. But Derrick Lewis has that ability to just get up. And against a guy like Fabrizio Verdum, you wouldn't be able to get away with that. Because if you're just trying to explode to your feet, he's going to catch an arm, he's going to catch your leg. He can switch from submission to submission. If one doesn't work, he can get for the other. With Oleinik, he's very dominant on those head and arm and neck chokes. And if Derrick Lewis is able to just explode to his feet, I don't know if Oleinik has that strength to really hold on to him and make something happen from there. So I'm going to say this. Derrick Lewis has one chance to just hop up to his feet. He's not going to be able to go to that well over and over because I do think Oleinik's a cerebral enough fighter that, yes, he might not be able to transition from the head to the arm immediately, but if you try doing that 2, 3, 4 times, he is going to pick up some rhythms and probably keep you on the mat. But Derrick Lewis on the feet, when Oleinik fights the majority of these big power punchers, especially once he starts, because this is what happens. Oleinik beats a few unranked guys, they throw him into a main event, he loses. Then he beats a few guys below him, they throw him into a main event, and he loses. And the Mark Hunt fight notwithstanding, Walt Harris knocked him out in under 10 seconds, I believe. Alistair Overeem just got him in that brutal tie clinch and brutalized his body with those knees. And I think Derrick Lewis is probably going to be able to have similar success with those guys. It's not going to be the crisp technique that Alistair Overeem demonstrated, but it's probably going to be similar to Walt Harris. Walt Harris threw like a double knee. It didn't really land. Just throws a straight left down the middle, drops a leg, then he finishes him on the ground. Derrick Lewis hits way harder than Walt Harris, and I think he's a better striker than him too. I think he only needs one shot to put out Oleinik, who, like you said, if you've had 59 fights in your career, 59 wins in your career, you've been at it for a while. Like, that's Travis Fulton level of activity at a certain point. And your chin just goes. And it's not that Oleinik can't take a shot. He's got a weird chin that way. But Derrick Lewis, when he hits things, they fall down. I don't see how Derrick Lewis loses this fight. I know the submission threat's going to be there for Oleinik, but Derrick Lewis is still a very good martial artist. He's going to be, I don't think he'll be able to get taken down by Oleinik in the first place, and I don't think Oleinik has the power to drop him to get him to the floor. So other than that, I don't see how Aleksei Oleinik beats Derrick Lewis in a primary kickboxing fight.
I mean, Aleksei Oleinik right now, 43 years old, just turned 43 a couple of months ago. Last weighed in, 227 pounds. On the flip side, Derrick Lewis, going to come into this fight 35 and a half years old, plus a day. And he last weighed in at 261.5. So it's kind of, yeah, it is interesting because he was one of those guys that weigh in, he'd be like 285 pounds, cut to 265 and then balloon back up, or some of it anyway. But the trouble always was Derrick Lewis, with whatever injuries he bring into the cage. The Travis Brown fight, he got kicked to the stomach, he was grabbing it. The fight against Mark Hunt, it was his back. The fight against JDS you had mentioned, his knees. Like, it all depends on what Derrick Lewis you're going to get. Because if you don't get a fresh Derrick Lewis, you don't know what you're going to get. And you had mentioned the last main event. This is going to sound terrible. Last weekend, Brunson, Shabazian, that one was great. You had mentioned the Hooker and Poirier fights. We've had really good main events in these Vegas cards, as well as the Fight Island cards. This is one of those ones that's kind of weird, and it feels like a lot of people are sleeping on it because everybody's focused on the big heavyweight fight, the trilogy between Miocic and Cormier. Now, in terms of the odds, you've got Lewis, the minus 225 favorite, Olienik plus 185, the underdog. Over on Tapology, out of 811 votes, 65% going Lewis, 87% saying by knockout, the 35% going with Olienik, 86% going by submission. So interesting there, and kind of what you'd expect. It's one of those ones that I see in my mind's eyes being a lot closer because, like you said, Lewis has decent wrestling, but he's susceptible to getting taken down, but he can pop back up. But Aleksei Oleinik's one of those guys that if you get it to the mat, you really have to worry about the submission abilities. Now, Verdum, you could kind of play whatever game you wanted. I mean, Verdum, one of the best, if not the best submission artist at heavyweight of all time. And I know it's either him or Olienik. It really is. But Verdum has great Muay Thai, or he did have good Muay Thai until that fight. And then after that fight, he looked amazing against Gustafsson. So it's really tough to tell what you're going to get with a guy like Aleksei Oleinik. Do you get the guy that just kind of looks like a deer in the headlights and he just learned, he took his first kickboxing class yesterday? Or is he the type of guy that can kind of parry with you? He can land those clubs, and then after that, he can set up the submission. So it's a weird one for me. I think Lewis has, he's obviously challenged for the title in the UFC, albeit you probably knew what was going to happen. I really do think it is, again, his fight to lose. There's a definite path to victory for Aleksei Oleinik. Let us know below in the comments who you're going with. I'm going to side with Derrick Lewis. It is not the most confident pick on this card.
I agree 100%. I do think Derrick Lewis could be able to get done. If you're one of these people on Twitter, though, who think that since DC was able to submit Derrick Lewis, that Aleksei Oleinik will, no. Because here's the problem. Daniel Cormier, black belt jiu-jitsu, but also probably the greatest wrestler in MMA history. And if you go back and watch that fight, he just put on a clinic on Derrick Lewis. He ankle picked him. Like, he was doing takedowns that you never see in MMA because you could just tell that he's such a high-level wrestler compared to what Derrick Lewis is, that he was able to just kind of hit him with every trick in the book. Oleinik's not that level of wrestler. Yes, once the fight hits the ground, he has some of those same, techniques and moves from on top. But the problem is he kind of lacks that transition of the wrestling where it's going to be really hard for him to take Derrick Lewis down. And if he is exerting a lot of that energy, It's odd to say, but Derrick Lewis has the better gas tank out of these two guys. So I just think as the fight progresses, as long as Derrick Lewis can avoid some of those submission attempts early on in the fight, it'll slowly favor him. And here's the thing. If Aleksei Oleinik is too happy to give up top position to stay on his back just to make it more of a grappling fight, Derrick Lewis throws some hammers from on top. He's another guy who you do not want to be under him, even if you are Fabricio Verdum or an Aleksei Oleinik. There's not really a game you want to play with Derrick Lewis because his ground and pound is hellacious. So I think Derrick Lewis could be able to get it done probably by TKO, and I'm going to say within the first 2 rounds.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this. Both going with Derrick Lewis, but there's a definite path to victory for Aleksei Oleinik. So let us know who you're going with down in the comments. Don't forget to check out the rest of the videos in the playlist. 11 more fights on this card. We just had the extended look at our main event. Keep it locked in with Fight Night picks this week. We've got Contender Series. There's Bellator. Maybe you're in the past. Maybe you're in the future, and those already happened. Really looking forward to it. Great to have the fights back. Keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. And as we always say, Matt, let's get into it.